welcome to Tripod, our video podcast series dedicated to travel retail in association with the SEVA Group. I'm Martin Moodie.
I'm Roger Jackson.
Roger, how have you been? We haven't talked for a while. It's the first show in a few weeks. How are you doing? How's your business? And how are you seeing the state of our great travel retail industry?
Yeah, it's great to be back with a new season of Tripod. I think we all had a bit of a break over the festive period. I think you mentioned about the industry. I think travel retail is going from strength to strength. Your part of the world where you reside, Martin, in Asia, is definitely coming back on board. I think it's only positive news stories we're hearing at the moment for travel retail. I'm seeing more and more brands, both new entrants actually, reaching out to us, and other distributors and retailers in the world now all wanting to rush back into travel retail. So I know from a passenger number perspective, we're not there yet. We're still sort of, depending on where you look in the world, but we're still sort of 20%, 25% down on passenger numbers. But I think there's every reason that'll recover by the end of this year, and that's what IATA and everyone else is suggesting as well. So I think whilst we're still in the recovery phase, I think we're well on track to deliver I don't want to say a pre-COVID view, because I think we all accept that post-COVID's a very different world. But I think our business is buoyant and we're well on track to carry on that growth and get back to the sort of business levels that we were all experiencing 3 years ago.
Yeah, I think so too. And talking to a lot of people in the industry, not just here in Greater China, as it were, Roger, but elsewhere, the Chinese floodgates haven't opened, but the Chinese are coming. There's no doubt about that. And talking to one of the beauty brands, for example, the Chinese are still a very insignificant proportion of their total customers worldwide, but in terms of spend, much more significant. So already we're seeing strong spending by the Chinese that are traveling. And obviously they're going to be traveling around the world in much greater numbers, and particularly here now. We've got the mainland and Hong Kong and Macau all open to one another. And so from February 6th, all bets are off in terms of restrictions. Hugely exciting. Here in Hong Kong, the government's announced a Hello Hong Kong, massive promotion, bringing people back, really putting big bucks in behind tourism. I think it's going to be great for travel retail. Macau's going to have a gangbuster of a year, I predict. And of course, Hainan's still going like the juggernaut it is. So all good news. Not there yet, as you say, but better and better. Well, Roger, we've got a really interesting guest. I go back with this guest a long, long way. You know him particularly well through your work with MEDFA, and of course your exhibition presence down in Cannes. Shall we bring in today's special guest?
Yeah, let's do it.
So this episode's special guest is John Rimmer, the Managing Director of Tax-Free World Association, TFWA, a man well known and much respected to many, many people within the global travel retail community. Well, today we're going to learn more about John from before, way before. He joined the association back in October 2012, initially as Conference Research and Corporate Affairs Director. 5 years later, he was appointed to his current executive leadership role for one of our industry's most important and effective associations, the host, of course, of the greatest travel retail show on earth, TFWA World Exhibition in Cannes. So today we're going to talk to John about his early years, his linguistic excellence, his love, perhaps that's an understatement, his ardor, his passion for a certain English football club, known all over the world, well, practically as the Baggies, his murky past in the world of travel retail journalism, including, yes, a stint at what was then the Moodie Report, and no doubt a few other stops along the way. John Rimmer, welcome to Tripod.
Thank you very much, Martin. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thanks to you and Roger for having me with you. It's a pleasure to see you both.
All right, great to have you, John. So I'm going to pass over to my partner in crime, Roger, if you'll kick off today's episode.
Hey, John.
Hey, Roger.
We always start off from the early days. So could you just give us a bit of an idea of what life was like growing up, education, family? So take us back to when you were a little boy.
Yeah, well, I was born in West Bromwich in the West Midlands in England. For those who don't know the West Midlands, it's kind of the Hawaii of England, except there's no beaches. It's not an island, and it's a little bit grim. I love it very much. It's where I'm from, and I'm very proud to be a West Midlander. But yeah, I was the youngest of four, two brothers, one sister. We had a very enjoyable life growing up. There were a few fights, as always in a family of that size. There were a few broken bones and broken egos, but it was generally good fun. And my parents were extremely loving couple who gave us a lot of love and a lot of support. So yeah, it was some happy memories at that time. Some people who know me in the industry know that I'm what the French call a métis, which is a beautiful word which describes mixed race. In my case, it's not really mixed race in a particularly exotic sense, but I am half Irish, half English. My father was born and raised in the Midlands, and my mother from the county of Cavan in Ireland, who came over to West Bromwich as a nurse when she was young, and that's where she met my dad, and so yeah, so I'm sort of mixed race, as it were, but that's given me some really priceless advantages, and it's given me a lot of loving family in Ireland as well, who I love to see, and looking forward to coming back seeing very soon. So yeah, it was a very tight-knit, lovely sort of family background, and still very close to all those guys, and try and get back and see them in the West Midlands whenever I can.
Whilst you're very well known in the industry because of your role, and I think a lot of people know who you are, and perhaps have had the odd conversation with you, those who know you pretty well know that you have a love for languages. Obviously graduating from Cambridge as well. Where did the affinity and I guess passion come for you with languages, and share with everyone the languages you speak as well?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure. I mean, partly it was because for whatever reason, when I was a kid, I enjoyed languages. I was quite good at them, and that you kind of gravitate obviously towards things that you're kind of good at and enjoy. I think I was always quite interested in the world beyond. I used to those of a certain vintage who grew up in England will remember a program called It's a Knockout, which was one of the things that I used to absolutely love watching as a kid, and watching the sort of international versions of that program. I just used to love it. I was obsessed about the World Cup. I used to organize my own World Cups. I was, anything that had a kind of international bent I was really interested in, and watching football from European games where the commentary is a bit fuzzy and it sounds very kind of far away and exotic. I remember being very kind of drawn to that, and I think one of the things I'm most grateful to Travel Retail is giving me the opportunity to kind of see the wider world, and that's something I'll always be grateful for. So I think I always had that kind of interest, and French culture and Spanish culture were the two that I really kind of was drawn to, and those are the two languages that I studied at university. I think the literature of both cultures is extremely rich. The history of those nations is absolutely fascinating. I'm really interested in how how language intertwines with the culture and history of a country to create a national identity. I think that's something that I just find very fascinating, and I was grateful for the opportunity to study that and to look in detail at why French is how it is, why Spanish is how it is, and how the history of both nations has kind of shaped the culture and the language. So yeah, those are the two. I did study a little bit of Russian as well at school, so I have kind of notions of Russian. Please don't anybody try to speak to me in Russian, because the conversation would be very short. But it is useful just when you're in Russia or in a country where the alphabet is Cyrillic, it's useful to be able to read it and that kind of thing. But reading is one thing, understanding is another. So I need to brush up on that. But what I really want to do, and I did thanks to TFWA, have a short beginner's course in Mandarin during the pandemic, which was really interesting. But I need to get back into that because it's a very complex language, obviously, but it's something that I think is really is again fascinating. So yeah, languages, I guess, is one of the threads of my life, I guess, going back a long time.
Martin mentioned at the start about your flirt with journalism, and I know that's where your career started. So, and also that's where you started in travel retail as well. So we should be all lucky for that, happy for that, and lucky that that's what happened. But tell us about that first role in journalism and sort of how that has shaped where you are now, and I guess any standout memories, especially maybe working with the other man on the call, Mr. Moodie.
Well, at first it wasn't just flirting, Roger. It was a full-on relationship. I had a very loving relationship with journalism and travel retail. It's going back to the year 2000. Actually, I answered an ad. Having come back, I'd lived in France for a few years, and then came back to England and answered an ad for a graduate trainee at a major company called Euromoney, which at the time was the owner of Duty Free News International and Travel Retailer International, both of which were overseen by Martin. DF&I at the time was edited by a certain Irishman who called me or emailed me, maybe email existed back in those days, I can't remember, but he got in touch and invited me for an interview at the headquarters in central London. And so across the desk from me at that interview was a certain Dermot Davitt, who grilled me mercilessly. And having seen my birthplace, I think, or I was living there at the time, on my CV, he said at the end of the interview, "And so are you a West Bromwich Albion supporter?" And as soon as he asked me that question, I thought, yeah, I can probably run with this. This is fine. But yeah, it was my first first real job, I guess, although I had been working in France for a couple of years before then. But it was a really good. I have very, very fond memories of those days, of the people, Martin, Dermot, but also some really good journalists that Martin will recall very well. You know, guys like Mike Eaton, who's a confectionery expert, Adele Woolston-Hume, who edited Travel Retailer International at the time, Joe Bates in Liquor, who's still around, Kevin Rosario, a lot of guys, and later on guys like Gavin Lipseth, Tina Milton, who I was pleased to work with. Some really good journalists who all kind of supported me and helped me to understand what the business was about. Understand, I think, Martin, what you really brought as well as your knowledge of the travel retail industry was a certain rigor and a certain pride in what you do. You know, make sure that you if you're going to write about something, get to know it, understand how it works. Don't pretend. Don't pretend, because you'll get found out, and you need to really immerse yourself in the subject that you're writing about and understand it and help other people understand it. So it was a really good grounding, and I feel very lucky to have started in that way. And in terms of memories, I mean, there's a couple of guys I'd like to mention who sadly are no longer with us, who were wonderful company and wonderful, professionals, if that's the right word. Desmond Begg is one who Martin would be able to tell infinite number of stories about. Des was a wonderful journalist, a wonderful man, and sadly no longer with us and died many years ago now, but was a drinks journalist who understood that industry like no one else, and was a fantastic source of advice. Some of it was good, Some of the advice was probably not so good, but all of it was just fascinating and a wonderful guy. And of course, Alex Smith, who we lost last year quite recently, and again, a real font of knowledge in wines and spirits, and just a real someone who was just wonderful company whenever you're with him. Those guys and the other guys I mentioned all helped to give me the kind of understanding and the passion that hopefully I still have for the products that we all care about, and the industry that we work in. So yeah, it was some really good memories at that time.
Seeing you,
nice to hear some of those names, John. It was a really strong team and a strong journalistic culture, and it had a great kind of succession plan, didn't it, going on? I remember when Dermot started, of course, as a graduate trainee as well. I plucked him out of a big folder of nominees for that job, or applicants for that job, and because my mum was Irish, I had a bit of a soft spot for the Irish, and there he was, and before you knew it, he was the editor. He was fast tracked, and John's kind of been very modest there, Roger. Because John was also fast-tracked by Dermot and did very well, and ultimately led TFWA for quite some time. So yeah, it was definitely far more than a flirt. It was a very successful stint in travel retail journalism, and as Roger says, that was the conduit to what's happened since. And on that note, John, you then moved to Paris, of course, and into business development role with Lagardère Travel Retail. How did that come about? And I'm interested in this, how much of a transition from that was writing about the business to actually being immersed in it. Describe that for us.
Yeah, I mean, it was I think it was definitely a major change. Obviously, as you say, there's a world of difference between writing about an industry and then working for a company that is striving to develop in that industry. So big learning curve for sure. But again, I was very lucky with the people that I work with, and the guy who was instrumental in bringing me over was Ambroise Fondeur, who's moved on from Lagardère now, but was there for many years. A guy I have a lot of respect for. At the time, the Aelia business that I joined was headed up by Michel Perrol, again, and a guy, huge respect for him. He had a wonderful career within Lagardère, and it was a role that I really enjoyed. In those days, Lagardère had a very international business, as they do today, but the duty-free side of it was still relatively underdeveloped. Apart from the French part, in France, the Aelia was extremely strong. They had some other interesting businesses outside France, such as in London Luton, which is still going strong, and a couple of other places, Belfast as well. But they were still kind of finding their feet in terms of international development. So I was kind of there at the start of that process, which over the past 15 years or so has really accelerated. And I think guys who have come in to oversee that, obviously Dag Rasmussen first among them, I think has really given them a lot of impetus, and that's been really good to see from my perspective, because it's still a company obviously I have fond memories of and I look out for. From my perspective, it was really interesting, because obviously the role was about identifying new opportunities and then helping to build a business plan if that opportunity was identified as worth pursuing. And so, I was dependent on a lot of people around me who helped me to understand what kind of questions you need to ask, building the product assortment that's appropriate for the passenger profile, looking at the KPIs and building a business plan around what you know of the traffic, what you know of what you think you can sell, what the right brands are, what getting the mix right, and all that was really very interesting, and it was challenging as a role, because anyone who's worked in business development will know that for every success you have several failures. The hit rate is not that high unless you're unless you're much better at your job than I was. But you have to learn from the failures and analyze why something didn't work and try and put it right the next time. And it's also a lot like a lot of things in our industry. It's about relationships as well, and you really need to build relationships with the business partners, whether that's in airports or with the brands, and so that that good relationships lead to good business partnerships, I think, because there's a trust that you're trying to build, and that in itself, I think, is crucial to the business development side of things. So it was as you say, Martin, it was a significant change, but I really enjoyed it, and again, there were challenges. It was you had to learn to deal with failure and try and turn it into a future success, and that's not always easy. But I learned a lot. I really did learn a lot, and again, I look back on those years with a lot of fondness.
As a West Brom fan, as we said at the start, and I'm a Bolton Wanderers fan, we're both used to relegation. I know, unfortunately, we're both used to relegation. You then had the first, and only relegation in your career when you joined the Moodie Davitt Report.
Roger. Come on, Roger. This was like winning the Champions League. This was the pinnacle. No, it was yeah. I mean, and Martin will recall we'd always kept in touch in any case, and had some interesting conversations. And I think what I genuinely, there's no word of a lie, what I've always had a lot of respect with what Martin and Dermot and their team do is that they're always trying to reinvent and always trying to do something new and different. And as Martin will confirm, those new projects or new initiatives, not all of them always work, but many of them do, and I think that the important thing is to be always on the lookout to do something new, and that was certainly the atmosphere when I joined Martin and Dermot back in 2010, I think it was at that time. What was even in the years that I'd been out of journalism and then came back into publishing with Martin and Dermot, what was clear was that the things had moved on quite a lot. I mean, the print model, which is obviously still exists and still is valid, but the online model was very much the driver of innovation in that sector. So it was interesting, certainly, to work with you, Martin Dermot, and to work together on different things. It was at the early days of all the things that now people take for granted with the kind of the online publications, multimedia executions, all the rest of it. It was early days in those days, and I remember being with Matt, who we should mention, Matt Willey, who's also played a big role in developing the business. We were getting very excited in those days about animated ads that we could do, which now is kind of par for the course, but in those days it was very new. So it was an interesting time to be involved, and again in the journalism side, and again fond memories.
Yeah, and then John, of course, you made the big move after that to TFWA again. Pretty special part of your life. You went in one role, you graduated to your current leadership role. Kind of sum up those years for us, and tell us indeed about TFWA today, the state of health. Three of your leadership years, I would say, have coincided with this rotten, horrid crisis, the worst, the most sustained in industry history, and you've led the association at executive level through that. But sum up the whole journey so far for us, if you will.
Sure. I mean, it's been really a very, very enjoyable time. I think for me, I think it's an association, and like any association, that stands or falls on the quality of the people who are involved in it. And I think we've been very lucky in the people that we have, and I've got to say, Eric Mortensen in that. He would, having known Eric for many years, and when the opportunity came to work with TFWA, he was a big part of that. And Alain Mangro, who was the CEO at the time, I'd also known for many years. So when I first had conversations conversations with them, it was immediately, I felt that this was an opportunity that I wanted to take. The early days, I was focused very much on the conference and research side. Conferences obviously was something that we'd dabbled in, I think, with a degree of success, Martin, with both yourself and in DF&I days as well. So it was a part of the business that I knew quite well. And TFWA, I think, have a history of doing that very well, both going back years before my time there. So that was the initial focus, and then when the opportunity came, when Alain decided to retire and the role became available for managing director, it was something that I felt, that I really wanted to have a crack at. So I think, again, the one of the major things that when I look back on TFWA and the time that I've had here, the major positives is the people that I've met. I mean, we have a management committee that is about 40 people, all of whom give their time freely because they want to sort of help move the industry forward. And I think, some of the people that I've met through that, I have the absolute highest respect for, and I've seen firsthand, the work that they do voluntarily to promote and defend the interests of the industry, and that's really important. And I think, as you say, Martin, the past few years have been tough. There's no doubt about it. I mean, we were in the darkest days of 2020. You're wondering whether the business model can hold. You're wondering whether physical events are ever going to happen again. There's very little visibility on what's coming up. We're still working through that. We're still, I would say, in a period where we're still striving for a degree of stability. Events are back up and running, and I'm really proud of the two events that we organised in Cannes, 2021, 2022. I can't praise the team in Paris and for TFWA enough of the work that they did to get those events happening. I won't bore you with all the challenges that we had right now, but you can imagine that it was a real tough time, and to get those events happening, bring people together again in tough circumstances. It was the permanent staff of TFWA deserve a huge amount of credit for the work that they did to make it happen, and the work that they're still doing, still in difficult circumstances to get this year's events happening. So it has been tough. A lot of pressures on the model, a lot of pressures, personal pressures, and all the rest of it that we've all lived through during COVID. But I think both we and the wider industry can look ahead to what I think is going to be a challenging but ultimately successful year. I think we're on the right track, both we as an association, but most importantly the industry. And that's the key.
John, through this journey of yours, which has been very interesting, across geographies and across different professions, but of course all within this travel retail community, tell us about the key influences, perhaps the mentors, not just career-wise, but life-wise.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, like most of us, like any of us, I think you look to your family when you need support and love, and I've been very lucky with the family that I have. My father, who's still around, 92 years young, back in the West Midlands, has been a constant sort of source of support for me, and someone who really is a kind of touchstone in my lives and the lives of all of our family. I mentioned, it's a sad memory in some respects. I mentioned my older brother Phil, who we lost in 2018. He is someone who, I think it's one of the sad things in life, one of the eternal truths, I guess, and that we hear a lot in country music, for example. What's the name of the song? You don't miss your water until the well runs dry, and unfortunately that's the case a lot with people. You take them for granted when they're there, and when they're not there, the loss is extremely keen, and losing Phil has left a big gap in all our lives and in our family, and I miss him desperately, but he's been a great support, a great influence down the years. I think in terms of our industry, I mean, I think my the people that I look to are probably pretty similar to you guys, and Martin, certainly, you know, we're of a vintage where we can remember the input that some of the kind of what you might call the founding fathers and mothers of our industry put in, and you know, I look to the guys like the Klaus and Gunnar Heinemann, Harry Deal at Heinemann, you know, the DFS, Chuck Feeney, never had the pleasure to meet, but Bob Miller, and then of course, you know, some of the pioneers in the Middle East, for example, Colin McLaughlin, George Hoare, and John Sutcliffe. These guys, we all, I think, owe an enormous debt of gratitude to, because they are the ones who really prepared the way for us that have gone afterwards, and you know, all the success and the renown and the quality of our retail these days in duty free owes a lot to the guys who put that initial work in back in the 60s, 70s, and whenever it was. So I think, you know, those guys, I think we all should remember when we're traveling through airports these days and seeing the amazing business that is done, the amazing quality of duty free. It owes a lot to those guys, and on the brand side as well. You know, the founders of TFWA, and Eric is still with us, thankfully, and you know, those brands who saw the value in travel retail, who understood what it could bring to national and international brands. You know, they really deserve a lot of credit for what we all enjoy today.
And I guess we spoke a lot about work, about actually your fascinating career, John. You know, I didn't actually realise, I've learned a lot myself today about all of the different roles that you've had and the breadth of them. Actually, not many people have had that in a career. But we've touched on slightly on life outside work, but we know you're a massive fan of West Brom. I obviously joked about the Moodie Davitt Report, but for those who don't know, West Brom is one of the oldest football teams in the world, just like my team is, Bolton.
Exactly, yeah. Founder members of the league, yours and my clubs, Roger, yeah.
Founder members, and it's, joking aside, steeped in history, so I know you're very passionate about them. So tell us a bit around, you know, being a supporter of them and football, and also, you know, I also know you love cricket as well.
Yeah, I think, Roger, you and I will understand how, you know, when you're born into a club, that is your club, and you kind of, for good or ill, you can't escape it. Not that I would ever want to escape it, of course, but yeah, I was born in West Bromwich, as I say, and the club was part of our lives from a very early age, and my father's a very passionate sports fan, and so my sister and brothers, we have always been sort of going to the games. I can't even. I'm always a little bit suspicious of people who say, "Oh, I can remember my first football game. It was this." I couldn't tell you what my first football game was, because I don't really remember it. I know I was very young, but it would have been. Yeah, I would have been a babe in arms almost at the first game. But in those days, that was kind of mid to late 70s. We had a decent team. That was the last kind of glory period of the West Bromwich Albion club. We were qualifying for Europe every year, and that was, you know, we were finishing in the top 5 in what was then the kind of Premier League First Division. So we had a bit of a glory period. My father's seen us win cups and actually seen us lift trophies, which I'm very jealous of. Hopefully one day before I go, I'll have that pleasure. But it's been I would say it's been a roller coaster ride. It sometimes it doesn't feel like that; it just feels like a long, slow descent. But it's more than obviously. Any Barcelona fans will know that their motto is, what is it? Més que un club, more than a club. And it is the West Bromwich Albion feels a lot more than a club to me, because it's about where I'm from. It's about the memories I have. It's about the family ties and the ties to back home, and so it's a kind of, yeah, it's beyond just the football results that are generally pretty poor. I'm hoping that we might possibly make it back into the Premier League at some point, but I think we're going to need going to need a bit of an injection of investment to really succeed. Football's changed a lot, obviously, since we first started watching it, and unless you have the financial resources, it's very difficult to get sustained success. So I think that might be beyond us, but it is a historic club. It's where I'm from, and I still get far too upset when things go badly. Many people close to me have told me just to grow up and stop caring so much about it. But it's difficult once it's got hold of you.
I know you've been a big fan of the English cricket team, which of course has inflicted great pain on my cricket team, the New Zealanders, in that last World Cup, courtesy, I have to say, of a Kiwi. But your passion for cricket's pretty strong too, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I played a lot when I was younger, and a bit of rugby as well, Martin. But that we can touch on. But yeah, cricket was in terms of participating. Cricket was kind of my first love, and I still am an active member of the cricket club back home where I played for many years. It's for those of us who have the lucky enough to see cricket and to enjoy it. It's I think one of the great sports in terms of its complexity, in terms of its the nuances of the sport, and the millions of ways in which you can discuss it and play it and view it, and I think from a social point of view, going and seeing a game is one of the pleasures in life that I hope to always have. There's nothing better than sitting and relaxing with some friends with a bottle of wine and watching a game. It's just fantastic. And I have a few things on my bucket list, including going to see a test in India, which I haven't done yet. And so all of my Indian friends in travel retail, I'm hoping that I'll be able to join some of them at some point in Delhi or Mumbai or wherever it might be to see England play. You mentioned the World Cup. I was delighted, obviously, that we managed to win the last one. There's another one coming up later in the year. But I think you mentioned the Kiwi team. I think what was really great about the rivalry that's sprung up between England and New Zealand is the spirit in which it's been played. I think that the Kiwi team are a model in that sense. They're a team that play very hard, but they play with a really acute and positive sense of the spirit of cricket, which is great to see, and I hope that continues. I wish I could say that about the Australians, but we won't get into that. Sorry if there's any Australians.
All right. Well, John, this bit's been fun, but we're going to have some more fun now. We're going to take you to our resident desert island. It has duty-free status, as you'd expect. Airfares are very high. We were talking about it before the show. So we're going to have to fly you, I'm afraid, on our distinctly low-cost carrier. That's Tripod Airlines. And when we get you there, we're going to give you a few creature comforts. So, Roger, why don't you kick off our time on the desert island?
So welcome to the desert island, John.
Thank you.
This is probably going to be the hardest question. Of course, you've got a duty-free allowance and you can buy any 2 duty-free items you'd like. You're probably our only guest who I won't push to name brands because it might be a bit awkward for you. But if you want to, that's up to you. But what 2 duty-free items would you bring?
Well, you're right, Roger. It's actually a really difficult question. Not so much to pick a brand over another one, but just to pick a product. There's so much these days, and so many wonderful products that we see, and I am going to mention a couple of brands because our business is all about brands, and I'm proud that our association represents those brands. There's a couple of products that are quite dear to me. One I would take is my favourite Irish whiskey, which is a sector that, as you know, has exploded in recent years. And I was in Dublin Airport not long ago, where the range was just phenomenal. And it was a huge pleasure to see some of the products there. But there's a more traditional one that I really like, and that, again, I mentioned my brother Phil earlier. He loved it, and we would often drown our sorrows after an Albion defeat with a bottle of Connemara Irish whiskey, and so that's the one that I would seek out in the airport before I board Tripod Airlines. I'm hoping for my other product that Tripod has a slot at Birmingham Airport, because it's a product that I think you can only get at Birmingham Airport. And I salute my friends there, Richard Gill, who's a good friend, even though he's an Aston Villa fan. You can get at Birmingham Airport West Bromwich Albion version of Dairy Milk. So that would be my, my confectionery of choice, and I would load that on board with my Connemara, and at least I'd have something decent to eat and drink when I arrived on the island.
Fantastic. I'm going to be speaking to Jaya about the Bolton Wanderers version, because I don't think that
surely
exists.
They don't do one. Surely no, they don't do one. Jaya, don't stoop to those levels, Jaya.
So you've got your chocolate and your Irish whiskey. What would be your choice of music, song or album, and obviously why?
Yeah, that's another really hard one. Difficult to choose one. And if you were letting me have just a single track, it's obviously it changes from moment to moment, but there's a really amazing. I'm a big fan of the Beach Boys, which I know there's certainly one fellow travel retail veteran, Art Miller, who's also a big Beach Boys fan. I would say that my favorite track by them would be Feel Flows. It's a really beautiful song. It's slightly strange lyrics, as sometimes it was the case with the Beach Boys, but a beautiful song. So if you were only letting me have one track, I would probably take that. If you were letting me have an album, and this is where the kind of geeky side, those who know me well know I'm a bit obsessive about this band and a bit obsessive about kind of electronic music. Kraftwerk, the German band, are one of my favorite and one of my kind of idols.
John, I suspect I might know the answer, but then again, you could surprise me. We're going to give you some great reading material. I'd like you to take your choice. It may be something you have read before, of course, as opposed to something you're looking forward to. But to while away those hours, what would it be?
I'd take a book that I had to study when I was a kid, and which I still enjoy, which is I hope this doesn't sound too pretentious. 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Obviously a bit of a legendary book and sort of magical realism, but it's a book that once you've read it, you just keep being drawn back to, and it's kind of a series of episodes kind of stitched together over generations of a single family, and as such you can kind of pick it up and read it again and then shut it and pick up it at another point at another time. So that would probably, if you were pushing me to choose one, that's probably what I'd choose.
Great author, great choice. Okay, back to you, Roger.
Yeah, so we've got our chocolate, we've got our whiskey, we've got our music, and we've now got your book. Now it's time for a special dinner party, and you can pick 3 special guests, whether they're alive or from history. Obviously, Richard Sneaks will probably be one of them. For those who don't know, that's a player who's played for my club.
He's a legend. He's a legend.
He is a legend. Or Bob Taylor.
Bob Taylor, another one. Yeah, we've had 2 common legends. Yeah, that's
we have. And I was lucky enough to meet them a couple of years ago.
Great guys.
Joking aside, who would you like at the dinner party? 3
well, actually, either 2 of those would be fine. But I think definitely I would love to have met David Bowie. I think he would be amazing company. Just an unbelievably talented individual in a number of different fields, and so I would have dearly loved to cook him a macré de canard. There's a journalist who maybe not many people are familiar with, but I find very funny, who writes for The Guardian in England, called Marina Hyde, who is just very witty writer, and I think she would be a very funny addition to the party. I would like to meet her. And then I'm torn between 2. There's a guy from your part of the world, Roger, who I find very funny Steve Coogan, who's Mancunian comedian, very famous in England, obviously for Alan Partridge, but a pretty good sort of comic actor in a number of different ways, and I just think he's very funny. And so the other guy, I mean, yeah, if you can allow me to sneak another one, there's a really legendary Belgian singer called Jacques Brel, who is just an amazing singer-songwriter and a bit of a character, a bit of an interesting life. He died sadly back in the 70s, but if anybody is curious and wants to hear some of his stuff, I really recommend it. But he was an interesting character with a very interesting backstory, and I think he would be a good addition as well. So I know that's 4 people, and that's 6 if we include Richard Sneakers and Bob Taylor, but you know, I'm a gregarious guy. I'll have more guests if I can.
Fantastic.
I think we could extend our table, Roger, don't you?
Yeah, of course. For those two,
we'll widen the party, because that would be a hell of a party. Okay, John, you've been a good sport coming on the show and coming to the island. So we're, as our treat, going to take you back on Tripod Airlines and fly you anywhere in the world, somewhere on your bucket list. After these horrible 3 years that we've all been through, and we're taking you away somewhere to have a great holiday, where would it be and why?
This is, I think, the easiest of the questions for me to answer, Martin, and it also brings us back full circle in a way. So it's a nice way to wrap up, because my choice would be Tokyo. And the reason, as you guys and anybody who's been to Tokyo will know, is just that it's just one of the most fascinating, beautiful, and endlessly interesting places on earth that I've been lucky to see. And I've been to a lot of places, but Tokyo is the place where I would never tire of returning to. The energy of the place, the food, the people, the sights and sounds, just one of the great cities of the world. And when I say it brings us back full circle, is because looking back to my first job in travel retail with DF&I, with you and with Martin, with you and Dermot and other friends, you guys were kind enough to send me there as my first international trip, my first big trip as a pasty-faced trainee in journalism, and you gave me the DF&I Japan report to do, and so that was my first real serious trip, and it was one that I really look back on again with thinking it was, that was the moment where I think the industry really sort of got its hooks into me, and just the opportunity as a not much more than a kid to go out there, meet some amazing people, see some unbelievable things, and it was then that I decided, this is something that I really want to do. So Tokyo, definitely, if you can find a slot at Narita or Haneda for Tripod Airlines and get me there after the desert island, I would be the happiest man in the world.
Very good, John. Roger, as long as we can afford the fuel, it's Tokyo next stop for John. Flying with us as pilot and co-pilot, so you may be in some trouble, John. You will have to strap in tight. I can tell you that, but we'll take you there with great pleasure. John, it's been great fun to have you on the show and discover, as we always do, some new things about people. Like, I've known you, I guess, for pretty much a quarter of a century, maybe a little more, but I would never have taken you for a Beach Boys fan. And there you are. And I loved the Beach Boys, and there was a bunch of geniuses in that, particularly one, a Tortured Soul, but great musicians and singers, and really a seminal influence on American and world music. There you go. So I discovered that, Roger, and I'm sure you discovered a few things along the way as well.
I did, yeah.
All right, John, we wish you well with, you've got a busy year and a much more normalized year coming up. In my part of the world, it's really exciting with, the borders opening up all around me, Hong Kong, Macau, the mainland. And of course, that's really important to the association, because you've got a big gig coming up in May, and it'd be great to have the Chinese back in their numbers. So we wish you well for that. Wish you well for all your events later in the year, and thank you for everything you do for the industry. John Rimmer, thanks for being on Tripod.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Roger. Delighted to be with you, and very best of luck to you and your companies for what I'm sure will be a really good and successful year ahead.
Well, that was John Rimmer, a really interesting guest, Roger. And as I just said to John, we discovered a few things about him that we didn't know. I enjoyed that. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I thought it was great. I've got to know John pretty well over the last few years, and I've found out some new things today. The fact that you two have worked together for quite a long time actually was new news. I think John's a great guy. I get on with him personally and also professionally. We both sit on the same Medford board, so I have got to work really closely with him, and I enjoy all my interactions with him. I think he's a great guy, both personally and also professionally. And I think the job he does, which is a hard job, Martin, being the managing director of TFWA is not an easy job, to pull together our industry and keep driving our industry forward. I always say, if you don't know much about the TFWA and you're in our industry, you should, and all of our other trade bodies as well. Let's put that out there. We need trade bodies, strong trade bodies like this. Our industry is constantly under threat and attack from a number of different areas, government and trade bodies, other trade bodies around the world, and we really need the United Travel Retail industry. And John leading that and the TFWA, we're very lucky that it's in safe hands. Because we really do need them. And if you're not involved with them and the other trade bodies, please get involved, because, you don't want to get involved when it's too late. You want to be there helping and supporting now to prevent, some of those risks that could actually impact our industry.
Well said. And as you did discover, I did work with John, both at Duty Free News International and later at what was then the Moodie Report. John's understated his role at both companies, as one would expect of him. He's a modest guy, but the Moodie Report, Roger, I should mention, he came in at a really tough time. We had a great start as a company, and then we got to 2010, and I got diagnosed with a very serious form of cancer. I had stomach cancer, and I remember hiring John the moment we kind of concluded the deal. I was on the phone in a London cab. I was going from one hospital to the other with drips hanging out of my arms as I went round the round of testing to see just how bad this damn thing was. That's the segue to saying that John came in and worked with his close buddy, comrade Dermot Davitt. Those two are an amazing combination and very good friends. And we didn't miss a beat through a year. And one would have thought we were really exposed. There was the founder, the entrepreneur, the driving force, pretty much stricken. But John came in and did an amazing job. And him and Dermot steered the good ship, the Moodie Report, through really troubled waters in those days. And I'll remember that and very fondly, because it was a tough time in my life. But at least I didn't see the business collapse. In fact, I saw it flourish. Probably did better without me, Roger. Great, a great journey he's been on, and I suspect it's got a long way to run yet.
Fantastic. Well, that's a lovely story. I didn't know that either, and it just tells me more about John, more of the same that I already knew about him. So I'm really grateful he came on, and I'm also really grateful, the support he's obviously given you, and the Moodie Davitt Report that we all need. Like I said about the industry, and I'm not saying this because I do this with you, but we need not only a really strong trade body, we also need a really strong press. And I think a lot of people rely on your publication and some of the others to really make sure that we're all informed, because without that, it would be a very, very difficult industry to navigate.
I think it's a responsibility that we carry, and I take that responsibility very seriously. Well said, Roger. I enjoyed today very much. I thought it was one of our best shows, and we'll have many, many more exciting guests to come in the weeks ahead. For now, thanks for viewing. This is Martin Moodie saying see you next time.
See you next time.